Witnessed by thousands and documented in towns all over the globe, she terrorises schools, libraries, castles and hospitals. Floating above the ground, she relentlessly searches for her lost love and causes panic and dread to all that encounter her. In tonight's episode of What Was That, we discuss one of the planet's most documented ghosts, the Grey Lady. Hello and a warm welcome to What Was That, a podcast dedicated to spooky stories, unexplained mysteries and much more. In today's episode, I wanted to begin with the tale of the Grey Lady. And well, I would like to say that there was one tale, but it actually turns out that there are a lot of Grey Lady stories situated all over the planet. I originally began investigating the story of the Grey Lady due to the fact that the small village where I grew up was in fact haunted by a Grey Lady. As a small child, I attended St Stephen's Primary School, which is a school in Astley within the Manchester area of England. And it's a small school and church that's situated a stone's throw away from a large, dilapidated and unused hospital. And as children, we would walk down the old gravel pathway that separated the school's playing fields and the tall brick walls of the hospital's grounds. And I always remember it being a pretty spooky place. Now, the pathway was shaded by trees that were bent and arched over the gravel walkway and into the wooded area and beyond the hospital walls. And it created a colourful tunnel around the path in the summer months, but it also created an eerie and almost claustrophobic roofline in the winter that really felt like it was about to swallow you up. Now, as children, we would play on the playing fields before daring each other to scale the hospital walls and look over the top in an attempt to see the Grey Lady or get a sighting of the Grey Lady's grave. And some of the other games that we would play is to locate a large stone that kind of resembled a tombstone that was situated in the tree line and attempt to lift it to see if the Grey Lady's bones could be found underneath. And obviously, looking back as an adult, these were just silly games made to scare each other, but the legend of the Grey Lady was simply terrifying, and even the toughest of kids would never be found using the long, unlit path between the hospital and the school after nightfall. So after reminiscing about these stories, what I wanted to know is if the stories were just playground tales intended to chill the bones of fellow students, or if there was any history to the Grey Lady and what really lied beyond the walls of the old hospital that made the hair stand up on the back of our necks whenever we were close by. So I decided to do some investigating, and on investigating the Grey Lady, I came across a lot of information on many Grey Lady stories from all over the world. And I'll talk about the history of some of those later in the show. But for me, the most important one was the history of the Grey Lady in my hometown of Astley in Manchester, England. In particular, the connection to the hospital, and what I found was pretty interesting. Now, there's not much information online about this particular Grey Lady, but I did manage to find two interesting articles about her. Now, one of the articles is called The Mort Ghost, a Halloween Story, and it gives a brief history of this particular haunting, as well as the origins of the ghost. I'm going to read some of that article for you right now. In the village of Astley near Lee, there is an area by the canal reported to be haunted by a ghostly manifestation described as the Grey Lady. This female spirit can sometimes be seen wandering the paths between Astley and Bedford, and she has been described by those mortals who have crossed her path as appearing to be searching for something. It is generally believed that this is the tragic spirit of the 18-year-old Anne Mort from Dam House, and that she is looking for a long-lost Catholic lover. This is a sad story of blighted love. It is told of Dam House that Anne, a daughter of a Protestant Mort family, fell in love with the Roman Catholic James Speakman. Anne Mort's father paid the Speakman family to leave the district in an attempt to divide the couple. It is told that Anne pined away and died of a broken heart. Legend has it that her ghost is still looking for James by the waters of the canal. Now, on searching for more information on the locations of the haunting, I did come across another article from the Lancashire Folk website that gives a pretty short but detailed history of where the Grey Lady or Anne Mort lived in relation to the hospital, and this is what it had to say. The building known as Astley Hospital on Leigh Road in Astley is in fact an ancient manor house. The inscription on the lintel informs us that it was erected in 1650 by the Mort family. It was built on the site of an earlier hall and was originally called Dam House, after the nearby dam which powered a corn mill. In 1893 the building became a hospital, and when the hospital closed in 1994, a heritage trust was formed to preserve the building for use as a community centre. The gardens surrounding the community centre are open to the public, but they are also haunted by a Grey Lady, Anne Mort of Dam House. Anne's family was rich, influential, and Catholic, so her father was outraged when he discovered that Anne had become romantically involved with James Speakman, a young labourer who lived with his family in an untidy cottage nearby. James was clearly not a suitable match for Anne, and her father did not allow the pair to meet, but nothing he said could turn the young lovers away from each other. They continued to meet in secret, walking the paths that crossed the moss around Dam House, until Anne's father decided that he must take more drastic action. He went to James's father and arranged to move the whole family to another of his estates in Lymm, well away from Dam House. James was not informed until the last minute, and when Anne went to find out why she had not heard from him, she found the cottage empty. Anne never forgave her father and never forgot her love for James. She walked to his old home every day and wandered the paths they had walked together, gradually losing her mind. She eventually died of her grief when she was only 18. Now Anne Mort is more commonly known as the Grey Lady, who walks in the grounds of Astley Hospital and the many paths and lanes nearby. She has been seen near the canal, around the old Lee Grammar School, and crossing Marshland Green. Those who have seen her, including a selection of burly workmen, say that she glides along, casting her eyes from side to side as if searching for someone. We know, of course, that the one she seeks is James Speakman, her true love. Now, for me personally, that is a more detailed background of the Grey Lady that I never really had access to in my childhood, and explains why there was such an eerie feeling of dread whenever I attempted to scale and climb over the walls of the hospital. Getting to the top of the wall required quite a lot of effort, but whenever I did get there and stared into the wooded area around the hospital, there was always something that was telling me not to climb down on the other side. And now that I know that the land on the other side of the wall was, in fact, the haunting ground of the Grey Lady, I'm pretty happy that I never did step foot on that side of the wall. Now, the information available on this particular ghost or haunting is pretty limited, but I was able to find a small piece written by a local resident called Julian Marsh, and it sounds a little bit like this. I know a few people that saw her. Eddie Lord came face to face with her whilst playing Roley in those woods. He ran straight home, and he still won't set foot in there. She was seen again by other mates, one autumn when they were all sat on the surrounding wall. A hooded figure formed in front of their eye and scared them stiff. We all saw her as primary school children. She was gliding by on a nearby field. It was a sighting by 30 kids and teachers as well. So as you can imagine, if sightings like this did actually happen, there's a pretty good foundation for why everyone in the local area was a little bit spooked when in and around the grounds of the hospital and my own school as well. It also makes sense now why none of us ever wanted to find ourselves alone on the grounds that were in fact haunted by Anne Mort, better known as the Grey Lady of Astley. Now, as the information on my very own Grey Lady dried up, I decided to delve a little deeper into some of the other tales of Grey Ladies from around the world. And a really interesting and well-documented one dates back to the 1930s and is situated in the Willard Library in Evansville, Indiana, in the United States. Tales of this particular grey lady were first documented in 1930, when a custodian claimed that they had in fact seen a ghostly grey lady within the library. Since that time, there have been many sightings of the grey lady by staff and visitors that have created a lot of interest from paranormal investigators. The Willard Library have a section of their own website about the Grey Lady that states that the Grey Lady was reported to have been witnessed on the 10th of August 2010 in the basement hallway by the assistant children's librarian. A library patron also has spoken out about having an encounter with the Grey Lady in one of the elevators. A local weathercaster reported having an encounter with the spirit, but what's really interesting is 2 police officers that were responding to a security alarm at the library reported seeing 2 ghostly figures in an upstairs window as they arrived. As well as the documented sightings, there have been multiple visits from paranormal investigators and psychics to the library, including one visit in 2007 where investigators and psychics confirmed that there was evidence that a paranormal entity had been there. Now, what's interesting is that not one, but 2 janitors employed by the library have had intense encounters with the Grey Lady that have had such a negative impact on their lives that they've had to quit their jobs in fear of seeing the Grey Lady again. On top of that, many visitors to the library have reported sudden cold spots, unexplained noises, taps turning on and off on their own, doors opening and closing by themselves, and a sudden and overpowering smell of cheap perfume when nobody else was around. On one occasion, a 3-year-old boy was wandering around the library on his own when he suddenly came rushing back to his mother, upset and eyes wide with fright. The young boy told his mother that he had seen a scary lady dressed in all grey. Other sightings reported by employees of the library include seeing the Grey Lady lurking around the bookshelves, and one of the librarians was walking by some book stacks one day when she stopped suddenly in shock to see the Grey Lady standing right in front of her. The librarian said that she froze for a moment in fear, looked away for a second, but when she looked back, the ghost had vanished. Also, from investigating this particular case, it's clear that the Willard Library Grey Lady is most famous for the alleged photo evidence of the Grey Lady, who was captured on CCTV security cameras that were installed in the library. And at some point, the cameras were renamed ghost cams, and they're actually live streams, and they became available to anyone who wished to watch and wait for the Grey Lady to appear. Now, the origin of the Willard Library Grey Lady isn't as clear as the one provided for Anne Moore, but investigators and locals believe that it is the ghost of a young lady called Sarah Carpenter, who was the daughter of Willard Carpenter, the original founder of the Willard Library. They believe that when Willard died, he left all his money to the library, and his daughter Sarah was left completely out of the will, receiving no inheritance at all. It is believed that Sarah Carpenter held a strong grudge against the library for her entire life, and when she finally died, her restless spirit returned to the library in order to haunt it. There are also other less detailed claims made that the Grey Lady is in fact the ghost of a young woman who drowned herself on the property before the library was built. Now, as well as having their own page about the Grey Lady, there's also some interesting videos about the haunting at the Willard Library available online. And to get a bit more information about this particular case, I'm going to play some of the audio from one of those videos. And the video is credited to Bo's Community Link, and it's available on YouTube. All the links will be in the show notes.
She was first seen in 1937, so there's some history behind the ghost. From 1937, our custodian at the time was tasked with coming into the building very early in the morning and stoking the coal-fired furnace for the upcoming day. And it was during one of these trips in, very early in the morning, that he encountered in the basement a figure, and he would go on to describe this figure as being female in a Victorian-style dress, standing in front of the coal-fired furnace. Now, he could not see this person's face. He described a veil or a gauzy material covering her face, but he realized when his flashlight beam was passing through her that he was encountering a ghost. And so in the words of the day in 1937, he shortly thereafter took to drink and saw the ghost fairly regularly after that. And he is the only employee to leave the employment of Willard Library and cite as his reason for doing so, always seeing the ghost and having nobody believe him.
I saw two big, huge orbs. I was facing this way, and I saw them with my naked eyes, and I just completely freaked out. They just came in, and then blink, they went off. And then in 2006, I was standing right over there, probably right where he is, but maybe about 4 feet that way. Something grabbed my arm. Something ran up, grabbed my arm, and swung it back like this. And then I looked up at the ceiling thinking something dropped on me. But the only way I can describe it is it felt like somebody grabbed my arm.
The Gray Lady has been most often seen in the library basement, but most often in the children's department in the library basement. There've definitely been the most encounters and sightings, particularly from a few of the different children's librarians in our history. Margaret Mayer saw the ghost quite frequently. In fact, frequently enough that it wasn't even anything special to her. She just regarded seeing the ghost as like seeing a friend or another employee. And our present children's librarian has had some interesting experiences. And I would love to invite you to come downstairs and see what we're talking about in the children's department.
My name is Rhonda Mort. I'm the children's librarian at Willard Library. And my most recent experience in the children's room was we had a jar kind of fly across the desk. I was sitting in the office with my back to my coworker. She was sitting at the front desk, and all of a sudden we heard this loud crash. And we both turned around and noticed that there was a large plastic jar on the floor that had been on the desk, but for some reason it just kind of flew off the desk. And we tried to explain it away with, oh, maybe there was a burst of air from the door, or maybe there was things that happened, but there was no real explanation. Well, in 2014, in the fall, I was showing books in another part of the library, and my coworker had kind of a panicky tone in her voice, and she called me over to the cameras and she pointed at the camera. And she said, Rhonda, what do you see? And when I looked, I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. So I said, I don't know, what do you see? But standing by the back door there, the glass back door, there was the figure of a woman, and she was a complete figure. She was dressed in old-fashioned clothing. She had her hair up, and she was very beautiful. I would say between the ages of 14 and 22, somewhere in there. And it was hard to tell, but she had a rather sad, pensive look on her face in profile. And we both just stared at the cameras for a little while longer, and then I asked my coworker, is that her? And she just nodded her head. She didn't say anything, and we were still staring. Well, as we were staring at the monitor, the figure at the door turned and looked into the camera. And when she did that, that's what convinced me that it was the Gray Lady, because when she stared into the camera, her face completely disappeared.
Just a handful of clips there, really good clips from a fantastic video about the Willard Library Grey Lady. So make sure you head over to YouTube. The links are in the show notes, and give them a like. Because this is one of the most documented Grey Lady cases with a lot of great videos. And make sure that you check out the Willard Library's very own ghost cams, and maybe you will see the Grey Lady for yourself wandering through the library, or maybe you will suffer the same consequences as one unfortunate librarian who went home one night to find the Grey Lady standing in her living room just waiting for her. Our next Grey Lady takes us back to Lancashire in England, where sightings of a lady in grey have been seen walking the grounds of Rufford Old Hall. The Old Hall has been of interest to many paranormal investigators due to a number of ghosts, including the figure of a man seen floating above the canal at the rear of the building. The hall has also been featured on the paranormal investigation show Most Haunted in February of 2010. And more recently, there have been reports of cakes mysteriously disappearing from the tea rooms situated within the hall. Now, I can confirm that I have never had the pleasure of visiting Rufford Old Hall just yet. So I do have a solid alibi in relation to those delicious cakes. Now, I have some audio clips to share from the televised investigation of the Old Hall, and I will play those later for you. But first, let's learn about the history of the hall and its inhabitants. Rufford Old Hall in Lancashire, England, was the home of the Hesketh family and was built in 1420 by Sir Thomas Hesketh. No expense was spared on the new house, and although only the Great Hall survives from the original building, it clearly indicates the family's great wealth and position within society. The hall is haunted by a number of ghosts: a grey lady, a man dressed in Elizabethan clothes, and Queen Elizabeth I. But there are also tales of hauntings by a priest that walks the halls at night, a murdered neighbour that seeks revenge, as well as the ghost of the original owner, Thomas Hesketh, who allegedly became possessed on his deathbed. The Grey Lady who originally brought our attention to the hall has been seen the most out of any of our spirits, usually by the main entrance or on the drive leading up to the house. She is thought to be the ghost of Elizabeth Hesketh, a young woman who became seriously ill while her husband was at war overseas. Elizabeth vowed that she would not die before saying goodbye to her husband, but he never returned, and her dying wish was never fulfilled. Staff and visitors to the hall have reported witnessing the ghost in and around the hall, and even feel that she's often following them, only to vanish when they turn around to investigate the strange sensation of being watched. To this day, the Grey Lady of Rufford Old Hall waits patiently for her lover by the entrance of her home. And it is said that anyone who visits the hall may be met with unwanted disappointment or anger from the spirit when she realises that you are not who she has been waiting tirelessly for all this time. Well, there's definitely no shortage of spirits at Rufford Old Hall, which is currently open to the public, which means that the hall is staffed by a team of people that look after the general maintenance of the building, as well as working as housekeeping and waiting staff. And most members of staff have reported feeling cold spots or finding objects that have been moved, as well as overwhelming feelings of being followed when walking through the hall. Now, as well as the many tales of the hauntings told by the staff who work within the walls of Rufford Old Hall, there was a more recent televised investigation of the ghosts of Rufford Old Hall. It was back in February 2010 when the UK-based paranormal investigation show Most Haunted visited the site of the hauntings with investigators and staff from the hall in an attempt to document some of the paranormal events that take place on a daily basis within the hall. So the episode on Rufford Old Hall is available to watch on YouTube, as well as a few other sites, and I just wanted to play a few short clips from that particular episode to give you a better insight into the home of one of our ladies dressed in grey. Now, I will warn you that as this is a stereotypical paranormal investigation show, there may be some loud bangs or screams involved, as they generally like to do that to keep the show a little more entertaining. So here's a few clips from Most Haunted's investigation that I think will add a little more depth to the background of the hauntings and the experiences of the people that have set foot within the hall.
The stairs of this beautiful house are said to be haunted by the ghost of a young woman, known as the Lady in Grey. It's thought that on the eve of her wedding, her betrothed was called to fight the Scots. He never returned, and now his lover is left to walk heartbroken and forever abandoned.
We have the famous Grey Lady of Rufford Old Hall. She is one of the Hesketh family whose fiance goes away to fight against the Scots in the Scots Wars and never comes back. She was going to be married to this poor gentleman, and she reputedly walks the grounds, walks the upper passageways of the house. Sometimes staff do feel like they've been watched, they don't like to go into the rooms, but this has been basically during open hours when we've had people and visitors walking around.
Now, Kieran, we've heard from the staff, absolutely fascinating. What do you think to their accounts, and what are you hoping for this evening?
Well, the main thing is the archetypal grey lady. We've been in countless buildings before where they've reported a grey lady. My God, if we actually catch her on footage, that would be brilliant. But there's an intriguing part of the grey lady story that I don't want to say right now in terms of where she's actually associated with, so I'll reveal that a bit later on. But this sense of presence is something that I'll be looking out for, and kind of a negative sense as well. I'll be watching the team and how they cope with that.
Are you sensing up on, picking up on any particular type of feeling?
The first thing I'm picking up straight away is an extreme sadness. Very, 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 very depressed, very, very sad, and it's a female energy I'm picking up on, and it's very much as if she's looking for somebody.
Walk behind us. Walk up to Chris. Shut the door behind you. Come into the room. Come on, slam the door.
Slam the door.
Make a noise with your voice.
Yeah, people are.
Oh, sorry! What's the matter? Don't push me again. Jesus, that was by force, that was. You all right? What, hands on your backside? On your face? What?
No, it was that real force.
You all right?
I told you, I keep feeling it like something's touching me.
Now, I hope that you're enjoying the show so far. A lot of time and effort does go into making each episode. And if you feel like you are getting value from the podcast and want to become part of our spooky community, you can become a patron of the show and support us and help us grow by heading over to patreon.com/whatwasthat. Maybe you can donate just $1 a month, or maybe even more. It all depends on how much value you get from the show. All donations go directly towards funding the production and distribution of the podcast. Now, each episode takes around 20 to 30 hours to research and produce, and any support would be greatly appreciated. So if you feel like supporting us as one of your favourite content creators, head over to patreon.com/whatwasthat and become a spooky supporter right now. Our next Grey Lady also shares a connection with Elizabeth I and resides within the walls of Hampton Court Palace in the borough of Richmond upon Thames, England. Hampton Court Palace dates back to 1515 when its construction began for Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, and it was later passed to King Henry VIII, who then enlarged the palace. Today the palace remains open to the public as a tourist attraction, but is also home to a spirit known as the Grey Lady. And here's what we know about this particular Grey Lady. The Hampton Court Grey Lady is one of the most famous in the list of Grey Ladies. She's reported to be the restless spirit of Sybil Penn. Lady Sybil served as a nurse to 4 English monarchs, including Elizabeth I and King Edward VI. In 1562, she nursed Elizabeth I during her battle with smallpox, a deadly and infectious sickness that almost killed the Queen. While Elizabeth survived, Lady Sybil contracted the disease herself while nursing Elizabeth. Lady Sybil then died and was buried in an impressive tomb at nearby Hampton Church. In 1829, the church was rebuilt and her tomb was moved during the renovations, an event which is thought to have triggered the hauntings of the Grey Lady. One story claims that shortly after her tomb was disturbed, strange noises were heard through a wall at Hampton Court, which sounded like someone working an old-fashioned spinning wheel. A search investigating these sounds revealed a previously undiscovered room, which was found to contain an antique spinning wheel, untouched for centuries. Investigators were stunned to find not only the hidden room, but also a direct link to the claims made by visitors to the palace. To this day, the Grey Lady haunts the palace and its grounds, and if caught alone within its corridors, you may hear her working her spinning wheel, or even worse, come face to face with her ghost. Dudley Castle near Birmingham in England is the host to our next Grey Lady, as well as being documented as the most haunted castle in England. The Grey Lady, of course, being the most famous of spirits that haunt this particular location. And this case is another fairly well documented one, mainly due to the photo evidence captured by a visiting couple that was documented in many news articles in August of 2014. Now, Dudley Castle dates back to 1070, but a further building programme was carried out by John Dudley in 1556, which included the construction of the stunning Sharrington Range, named after his architect, William Sharrington. Today, the castle and its courtyards are the host of highly popular ghost walks, which enter into the true spirit of the site, as it is heavily reported to be haunted by the ghost of the Grey Lady. And here's a little bit of history about Dudley Castle's very own Grey Lady. The spirit known as the Grey Lady is thought to be Dorothy Beaumont, a lady married to a commander of the Royalist forces during the Civil War. In 1646, she gave birth to a daughter at Dudley Castle, where her husband was stationed, but the child died at birth. Dorothy too succumbed to the childbed fever, not uncommon at the time. As she lay dying, she requested that she be buried next to her child and that her husband be permitted to attend the funeral. After her death, neither request was granted, as the parliamentary forces were besieging the castle, making it too dangerous. She is said to wander the grounds aimlessly, searching for her child that should have been buried beside her. Now, you know, as a parent myself, I am both saddened by these kinds of tales, as well as absolutely terrified to ever find myself confronted by the ghost of a mother searching for her child, because that is going to be one determined ghost who will not stop until she gets what she wants. Now, as well as the many newspaper articles about the photographic evidence of the Grey Lady, I did find a short audio report regarding the famous chilling image that was captured by Dean and Amy Harper from Birmingham, England, back in 2014. It's only a short clip, it sounds kind of amateur news, but I did want to give you access to it as part of this segment of the show.
Could this photograph prove that there's a ghost at Dudley Castle? Well, Amy and Dean Harper from Birmingham say they are now firm believers in ghosts after snapping the picture of the figure whilst visiting the Norman Castle. The couple's family day out took a spooky twist after they took several pictures, but didn't take a proper look until they got home. It was then that they spotted a grey and ghostly figure standing in one of the archways of the Sharrington Range Tudor Palace. Amy says she believes the ghost could be a well-known spirit named the Grey Lady, who is said to have haunted the castle for centuries after her dying wish to be buried next to her child was never granted. But despite the couple's firm belief following their photographic revelation, experts say the ghostly apparition within the picture is actually much more likely to be people just recognising distinct features or patterns in objects or images.
Obviously, because this is an audio podcast, you as the listener are unable to see the photograph right now, but you can find it by simply searching for the Dudley Castle ghost online. My own opinion of the image is that it certainly is a pretty clear and chilling image of what appears to be a young lady wearing a grey, old-style dress that swoops over her body as she stands in one of the doorways of the castle. Now, in written news reports, there is a quote from Amy Harper, who captured the image with her partner, that says that when Amy returned home after visiting the castle, she inspected the images, and on this particular image, she noticed a strange glow coming from an upstairs window. On further investigation, she zoomed into the image when she noticed that there was an unusual lady standing in the archway below the window, and what appears to be a little girl. Now, it most definitely is a pretty eerie image, so I encourage you to go and have a look for yourself and let us know what you think is it the Grey Lady? And who is the young child also claimed to be captured in the image? I've got one more case of the Grey Lady for you, and I can honestly tell you that even with all the eerie cases we've discussed in this episode, we are merely scraping the surface when it comes to the tales of the lady dressed in grey. Our final tale of the Grey Lady takes us all the way to New Zealand, where the hauntings have been so intense and affected so many people that even an entire school was closed down whilst it was investigated. For our last tale of the Grey Lady, we visit Cumberland College. Cumberland College is a student residence hall run by the University of Otago in New Zealand. Cumberland was established as a residence hall in 1989, but the building has a long history. It was originally built in 1916 across the road from the Queen Mary Maternity Hospital. It was used as a nurses' hostel or home. Today, Cumberland College is still linked to these two hospitals via a series of dark and winding underground tunnels. The building has one permanent resident, a ghost known as the Grey Lady. Her presence dates from when Cumberland was used as a nurses' hostel, and she has remained in residence ever since. In May of 2012, a media frenzy took hold when it was reported that several students and staff at Cumberland had seen the Grey Lady. These sightings scared the residents to the point where they were keeping their lights on at night and rooming with other people. One sighting involved two female students who at 1 a.m. one Tuesday morning encountered a ghost as they made their way to the laundry room on the first floor. While in the laundry, the two women claimed that they smelled something strange coming from behind them, so they turned around. They immediately felt an intense cold spot before seeing a large figure appear in the middle of the hallway. They described the unknown figure as being dark but glowing at the same time around what would have been the figure's feet. These two women were not the only witnesses. Kitchen staff reported that they had seen the same apparition on a number of occasions that same month. One resident of Cumberland even managed to capture a photo of the Grey Lady as she stood looking out of one of the resident hall windows, silhouetted by the room's light. These most recent sightings resulted in a lot of students being frightened, and although the university did not make an official comment about the matter, Cumberland was put on lockdown. During this time, the media was encouraged not to use terms such as utterly petrified and sheer terror when describing the incident to ensure further panic was not induced. Most students at Otago do not know the history behind this haunting, but many of the 7,000 students that have lived in Cumberland since it opened in 1989 have seen the Grey Lady. The Grey Lady is believed to be a woman who was a patient who gave birth at Hayward College when the building was Queen Mary Maternity Hospital. It is stated that this woman was deemed unfit to be a mother by doctors, leading the nurse who was attending the birth to take her baby away. The patient is said to have died suddenly shortly after her baby was taken from her. The nurse who had been ordered to take her baby then started to complain that the ghost of the mother had followed her home and was now haunting the home where she lived. We now know that the place that the nurse called home was in fact what we now know as Cumberland College. To this day, the Grey Lady walks the halls of the college, searching for her child and looking to seek revenge on all that get in her way. There we have it. We've come to the end of our Grey Lady stories for this episode. And like I said earlier on, we've merely scratched the surface when it comes to Grey Lady stories from all over the world. It seems to be a staple of British and many other countries' folklore that people who die violently, tragically, or with deathbed requests unfulfilled are likely to return as revenants or spirits to torment the living. And these stories are no exception. The Grey Lady is a legend which sees women who died horribly at the hands of men in particular, or who died broken-hearted, haunting the living as a permanent reminder of that injustice. And if you look closely enough, you will most likely find your very own Grey Lady just waiting patiently somewhere close to your own home, just waiting to be found. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure researching the Grey Lady and producing this show for your entertainment. I will be back very soon with a brand new episode, and until then, I'd really appreciate it if you could join our new community of spooky supporters by visiting and liking our Facebook page. And you can find that at facebook.com/WWT podcast. And if you feel like you've got some real value out of the show, why not consider becoming a patron of the show by visiting patreon.com/whatwasthat. One last request is that when you get the chance, please review the podcast on iTunes, because it really helps new listeners find the show and ultimately become part of what is sure to be a fantastic community. So it's time to leave you now, and I really do hope that I haven't left you with too much nightmare fuel. Leave the lights on if it makes you feel better. And remember, there's nothing to fear except fear itself. Unless you are, of course, confronted by the legend that is the Grey Lady.